And we are live. Welcome back, everyone. It's been a while since I've done some streams, but tonight I decided, you know what? Outside of torturing myself at work, why not also torture myself online as we go through another debate? It is, of course, a Godzilla 98 related debate. We're going to be talking specifically about whether or not Godzilla 98 is closer to the beast from 20,000 Fathoms than it is to the original Godzilla. The person who's going to be posting on this one is going to be Defender as per usual. So maybe giving him the invite. Also, I'll be sending the invite to a few other chatters who kind of like the movie and may want to argue the point. So they bring us some variety, and if people want to kind of jump in, they're willing to kind of see where the night's going to go. It's not going to be a super long stream. Probably want to make it around maybe like an hour and a half or 2 hours at most. And that's primarily just because of the fact that, one, I am working so much with the Christmas season right now, so I don't want to be too overburdened with the works. And Abyss Kaiser doing his best Siegmeyer impression. Doing some Onion Boy moment. So there we go. It's sent to Defender. I also sent it to the chat. Here we are. So still link to him. I'm also, I know, since it's there as well, I will also try to put the link. I'm going to put the link under the Twitter post as well. So I'm going to post that there. There we go. So that's since. But in the meantime, while we wait, because I know how it always works is that Vic is, of course, on the other side of the country from me. So it's always just a little bit long for him to get on. But if anyone does have any questions they want to flip by as we wait, you are more than welcome to do so. And actually, it not take him too long. There he is.
Hey.
He's the G90 Appreciator. Actually, I think this is the fastest time you've ever gotten on the stream before.
Oh yeah. I have a new Christmas schedule, so I'll probably be out like around 4:30 Pacific Standard Time.
4:30. Actually, this is gonna be good. So 4:30 p.m. 4:30 Pacific Standard Time to Eastern Standard Time. I mean, to be getting on around 7:30. Okay. Well, since obviously I do late shifts anyway, and I leave at 10, that just essentially means I'll always start the streams around this time if I'm doing more around the weekend. Okay. So of course, since you're the main man coming in for the debate challenge, you can present your point first, and if you have any like PowerPoints or images you want to bring up, you can do so in this point while I bring up mine.
All right, cool. I guess I'll send over one little thing that I made with some of the points of comparisons. I'm sending it to you now on Twitter.
Okay. It's right there. All right. It's just loading. There we go. Presents share screen. And there it is. Okay. So I'll show you on stream, and then there you go. So if you want to explain your point on this, you can go off, and I will wait, and I will not respond until you do go.
All right. So I guess this all started when I wanted to mainly talk about the common I guess like critique about Godzilla '98 when it comes to the movie is that it's more it'd be better for the movie to be a Beast from 20,000 Fathoms remake instead of I guess a remake of Godzilla.
Mm.
Um, and then it's something that like I've never really agreed with. Like even though yes, Roland Emmerich did take inspiration from the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms as he's stated before, but like I don't believe that like just taking the name of Godzilla out of the movie would make it a better remake of 20,000 Fathoms than Godzilla. And like here are some main points more towards like the individual characters and stuff and like what we see in the films. Like the first row is just about how they come into the story where like the both the Godzillas are like directly mutated from the bomb versus the beast where he's like awakened from it like from a hibernation and like that's just like the point of origin that differs between the two Godzillas and the beast. And then I guess going to like design wise the beast is a quadruped versus both Godzillas being bipeds, seeing as how they're more inspired by classic versus or modern T-Rexes in general versus like the Rhedosaurus that has a more sauropod design aesthetic being a quadruped. And then when it comes to like powers, like both the Godzillas, although one is like has one has like the more common abilities than the other. Both their powers stem from like being mutated from the bomb, versus the Rhedosaurus, which doesn't really have any powers outside of maybe being like having the prehistoric disease. But I wouldn't say that's a power. That's more just like an attribute of it.
Mm.
And then both the Godzillas have mentions of being having lingering radiation to them and it being brought up in the film different times throughout the film, versus the Rhedosaurus, which doesn't really get much have much of an allusion to like the bomb other than being awakened from it. And then those are just like the few points that I came up with when it came to differentiating them in the movie.
Okay. So starting off, I would say, in the case of at least the first 54 Godzilla, we know that Godzilla 54 wasn't just mutated; it was also awakened from nuclear weapons. So I would say that in the case of 98 to 54 to Beast, there's a lot of similarities, although Godzilla 54 has both him being awakened and mutated, while in the 98th case it's just a pure mutation. But I would say that that's fair. Quadruped bipedal, that's fair. Powers, with unnatural powers, I would say in the case of especially in the case of Godzilla, the atomic breath is definitely unnatural. Although I would say in 98's case, the power breath, being able to use gases to produce a fiery mixture to throw at opponents, it's a mutation. Although I wouldn't say it's necessarily like unnatural. Although, for the sake of argument, let's say sure, that's fine. No lingering radiation. That's also fine. However, I'd also argue, especially in the Planet 98, where although there's traces of radiation, in the case of Godzilla 54, the point of having a lingering radiation is brought up specifically as an overt negative.
Mm-hmm.
While in the case of 98, although it's there, it essentially is only used within the context of the story to explain that Godzilla in this movie is mutated, but not that because it's created by the atomic bomb, it is giving off the same dangers as an atomic bomb. And in the Rhedosaurus's case, it could be argued that 54 and Beast share that in the case where things that they give off are directly harmful to humans, like atomic bombs. So they both could be better bomb illusions in that sense. However, I would say that yeah, in the case of like overtly saying that they're both caused by radiation, yeah, that works in that sense. So like, there's some points where like semantically it could be argued that yes, that's true, but I would also argue the context is key there. Which let me remove
Mm-hmm.
yours and I'll bring up mine. There we go. Percent screen. And where is mine? Is it not? I have to bring it up again. Okay. So. Yeah, so in cases of Rhetosaurus, Godzilla, and 98, green it's shared between the green is shared between Rhetosaurus and Godzilla, red is shared between Godzilla and 98, and the yellow, orange, goldie is shared between the Rhetosaurus and 98. So both are awoken by nuclear weapons. However, these both are mutations. Both are prehistoric creatures, while this one is not. Both 98 and Rhetosaurus, they both come to New York because of biological urges to do so, which is very key to their characters, whereas Godzilla does so allegorically and isn't going there just because it's an animal. Both the Rhetosaurus and 98 are weak to conventional weaponry, while Godzilla is not. Both are bipedal reptilian monsters, while the Rhetosaurus is not. In terms of their deaths, typically the Rhetosaurus dies to conventional weapons because of the fact that the wound given to it is what later spells its death, similar to how in 98 it being trapped is due to missiles, and it dies to missiles, and they're both kind of trapped in a sense, one in the roller coaster while the other one on the Brooklyn Bridge. And then, of course, Godzilla dies due to a special weapon, which is key to the allegorical theming of the character. So there is that. In the case of Godzilla, I think Godzilla knocks off all these marks here. So just going back to these, related to nuclear energy in some way or shape or form, has attributes that for any Godzilla should have these attributes at least possessed by the first incarnation in this case. So having the atomic breath and immune conventional weaponry, having the underlying thematic element of being either a force of nature, antagonistic victim of tragedy, a loose allegory, or an allegory for reckless destruction of man's arrogance. I think 54 typifies all of these. And however, in the case of Rhetosaurus, it is related to nuclear energy. It does not possess these. However, it is viewed as a force of nature. And I could say it's also a allegory of man's recklessness. I could also argue that it's an allegory for just a destructive entity and a victim of tragedy, which if I was to add those two, it would essentially make it very close. It just doesn't have the atomic breath or immunity to conventional weaponry. And in 98's case, it is related to atomic energy, which is fair. Does not have an atomic breath, is not immune to conventional weaponry, and it is a victim of tragedy. Sure. It could be argued that it is an allegory about man's recklessness. However, man being able to kill it with widespread use of simple weapons kind of cuts the tragedy of the character. So there is that. Is there anything here you want to argue on that point, or no?
I guess I would argue there should be like more yellows for the 98. Like I
The
would
yellow
say,
means that yellow in this case is that there's a caveat. So for
I still
example,
think there should be a yellow and force of nature and destructive entity.
yeah, okay. Sure, I can do that. So, and I'm not sure why it's brought that up. So, essentially, in this case, since we're giving yellows, so essentially means it's yes with a caveat. Would it then be fair to give yellows or greens in these categories as well?
Sure. I wouldn't argue against it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I would say, in this case, I would say definitely a victim of tragedy. I think that would definitely be a green there. Sure. Actually, I wouldn't say no. I would give that a yellow in that case, because although it's a victim of tragedy, it is it dies because of its own urges to essentially be in its own habitat, what was left of its habitat. And I would say definitely it could also, I would say a yellow or green could fit for this, but fair, I will give it a yellow here as well. But yeah, would you say that between these two, there's anything you'd want to argue? Say that um, the two here for the beast are more yellows than greens, or not really?
Mm, I would argue it might be closer to 98, mostly due to the fact that when it comes to like the beast and how thematic the element of the bomb is to the story, I would say it might be more of a yellow for the beast versus Godzilla,
Mm,
mostly due to like the context of what went into the creation of the original Godzilla versus um Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
mm. And real quick before I argue my point, so what is this discussion exactly about? Besides comparing movie monsters, so we're comparing the movie monsters, but we're also seeing on a fundamental level whether or not Godzilla '98 is more closer to the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms than the original Godzilla because of what it takes away and what it adds. So that is kind of what the whole discussion is going to be about. Um, So in the case of the yellow, you think that because there's less of an underlying theme about like the dangers of atomic weapons, it would be more apt to put a yellow here for the Redosaurus rather than a green.
Mm, I would think so. Just because like when it comes to like how the bomb is like expressly related to the Redosaurus and what it does in the story, I think Godzilla 54 does more to connect Godzilla to the bomb and like its I guess its power and its importance to Japan.
Yeah,
Like
but I
more
would say for 54, sure, definitely. But I would say in since we're giving all three a green, would you say that 98 being related to nuclear energy is on par with 54, or closer to the Redosaurus, which would mean both get yellows?
I would say Redosaurus should get a yellow because both 98 and 54 were directly affected by it in some way more than the Redosaurus merely being awakened from it.
Well, it's being awakened, but it also means that but 98 being awakened results in it essentially just still living out its biological urges, and ultimately it's still just a lost animal in a city, which fundamentally would make it the same as the Redosaurus. Even though the Redosaurus isn't mutated, the effect in the film is still largely the same.
Hmm. So So would you say that both 98 and Redosaurus deserve a yellow in terms of like being related to nuclear energy?
I would say, yeah, in this case, I would say that if we're gonna say that because the Redosaurus isn't as tied to the bombs in terms of what it means, then giving it a yellow is fine. But then that would also then mean that 98 as well would also get a yellow in that case.
I would still argue 98 might deserve a green more so than the Redosaurus because with it being mutated and being like forced into its position um because it's been like affected by man and now it has become a problem for us and like
Well, in
it's
that case, both of them still have become problems for man because both were, even though we could say that 98 has been affected by man in the film. Nick directly states that if the babies are allowed to escape, then they would essentially overrun the planet and replace man as a dominant species. So although it's a problem for us, it really doesn't affect 98 in the sense of um, it is now at this disadvantage. It is more or less given a stature as well as abilities that would therefore help it rather than hinder it. While in the case of Godzilla, we see that because of his mutation, not only is he tragically given his size and his powers, but also um, the allegorical nature of it being still related directly to bombs that have affected people is why it acts in the way it does. Whereas in the case of 98, it is similar to the Redosaurus and just being a larger animal.
What about like in terms of like the global stakes of when it comes to like how big of a problem it is? Like with 98, it has like the potential to like overtake humanity and spread across the world if left like to its own devices versus the Rhedosaurus, which mainly stays in one area.
That is true. However, within both of the films, that happens to both monsters anyway. It could be still argued that yeah, Godzilla is a danger to humanity, so is 98. But it could also be argued that if the Rhedosaurus wasn't taken care of properly, it still would have spelled doom for like a lot of people because if they had killed the animal, then the disease would have carried through the air and infected more people. So there's still
Mm.
at least a larger problem than just a small number of people being affected by it. Um, we could say that because 98 is closer to like a global scale issue like the first Godzilla, we could say sure, but then in the same case, what ends up happening in the movie still is far closer to the end of Beast from 20,000 Fathoms than the 54.
Mm. And then I guess let me just ask you this because I've been trying to think of when would be the best time to ask this, but like how much Godzilla do you have to take out of 98 to make it the beast from 20,000 Fathoms?
Wait, how much of Godzilla would you want to take out of the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms? I would say in this case, you can remove essentially remove the power breath and change the baby subplot to the disease subplot, then essentially you're right on the money in that case where it's like almost one for one, although the argument is less. If we kept on taking away more from 98, we get the beast more or less like, oh, these plot lines and these characters add so much up to each other so closely that excuse me, that 98 is essentially a remake.
Well, I would argue that aside from like the plot elements, you'd have to take out like aspects of the design and then like what mythology we do have of explained in Godzilla 98 when it comes to like the Godzilla name and like why it's given to him.
Well, and in the case of the in that case, yeah, you can remove how the monster gets its name, but there's also there's more similarities in that whole exchange than some people realize. And I'm gonna add someone else who said he wanted to join. That he's gonna be on your side, so it's not gonna be a 2v1 in my favor. Let me just stop sharing for a second. Invites. And there we go. Okay. And I need to reshare my thing again because I have a specific slide for that. So go back. So, in the cases of the films as a whole, across the board we see that all three monsters, their first appearances after the use of nuclear weapons is attacks on ships. With the Rhedosaurus, after we see it come on, we see 98 appear. They both attack ships. With Godzilla, same thing. In the cases of the Rhedosaurus versus 98, the key weaknesses in identifying the monsters are thought of as crazy, and something like that wouldn't be true. Both 98 and the Rhedosaurus travel to New York due to biological urges. In the Rhedosaurus's case, it's almost like it's returning to its spawn or where its home is. In 98's case, it's looking for a new home in the case of a nest. Both 98 and the Rhedosaurus move through the city without overtly trying to destroy it like Godzilla does. They're just kind of surveying, seeing what's up. And in both cases, the cities are evacuated to engage the creature. The monsters are engaged. The blood tests are done on both monsters to find evidence about a key subplot, which does not happen in Godzilla at all. And military maneuvers are thought to have killed the creature off. Doesn't really happen in the Rhedosaurus, although we could say after it's first thought of to be bleeding, they think it's going to die, but then we have the disease subplot bring up. But both creatures are damaged by the military and later killed while being trapped inside structures. in the Red Source's case, the roller coaster, and in 98's case, it's the Brooklyn Bridge. However, in Godzilla's case, it has an initial attack on the city, then a return attack, and then finally it is killed by a super weapon. And looks like the other person who is joining has arrived, so I will add them. Welcome, GP.
Hello.
GP, you are live.
Hey.
How you doing?
Yeah, I just thought I'd start off with the old famous Raw. Anyway, so we're talking about the concentration between the beast, the Rhedosaurus versus Godzilla versus the Godzilla 98, Zilla.
Yeah.
So this is what I find very, very fascinating, guys. Here's the thing. Wasn't the Heratosaurus also waken up by a nuclear explosion as well?
Yeah, we've all agreed to that.
So that's a rather interesting thing. That almost actually all three versions were waken up by an atomic blast, or somehow mutated by an atomic blast.
Yeah, well, that's why I said in this slide here that both these monsters were awoken by nuclear weapons, while in this case, both of these monsters had some form of mutation due to their let's call it encounters with the bomb.
So in a way, you could say that the Eratosaurus, Godzilla, and also Godzilla 98, sort of like Godzilla's like an amalgamation between the Heratosaurus and Godzilla, if you think about it. It's like a combination between the two. That's the reason why, yes, I like, as you know, man, I'm a big fan of the Godzilla 98, but also, I also don't mind the Heratosaurus and also classic Godzilla as well. But as you can see, it seems like when the guys made the 98 version of Godzilla, they took like components from Godzilla, but also took the main components from the Heratosaurus. Because even if have you guys ever seen the movie? Have any of you guys ever seen?
I watched all three movies last night before this just to prep for it properly. Yeah.
Because the beast from 20 fathoms, that's 20,000 fathoms. That's the only movie I have not seen yet, so I'd love to get my hands to see it.
I know.
From what I've heard from many,
if you want, you can. Just as for everyone in the chat, a lot of these movies, if you just go to YouTube and you look it up, you can either buy or rent the movies if you want from YouTube.
Oh, okay.
So there's that.
I might have to do that at some point because I really like the design of the Heratosaurus, and I would like to look into more of that version of that kaiju's backstory. But from what I gathered, as you've put even in this little description here, and you're a Godzilla fan, so you've pretty much put this into a perspective of what each version of the monsters have in common and what they don't have in common, which is pretty well done as well.
Well, what they have in common with another monster, what they have in common with another monster, and sort of like what they all kind of have that's unique to them.
Yeah.
But moving we had gone down to the plots of the movies, and of course, he hadn't seen the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. So in Defender's case, obviously since you've seen the films, would you say that these analyses here are apt, especially with the fact that in both 98 and Beast cases, of course, like it may be cheating to say like, oh, both of them attack the same city, so they're the same, although the reasons for both of them attacking the same city are similar, not to mention the fact that it's the blood test that the subplots for both of these monsters have that information exposited to us, not to mention similar ways in which death had occurred for them both. Would you disagree with those or no?
I would agree with the general top points. Aside from maybe like the second one for 98, where the key witnesses are considered crazy. Like I don't think Felipe considered the sailor crazy, the only one who survived.
Well, however, in the novelization he is kind of considered crazy, not to mention the idea that a giant monster attacked your ship is still very like unlikely until they start finding footprints in Jamaica and the like. So
well, I haven't read the novel, but I guess if we're gonna include that in with this one, then I suppose I have to give you that.
Yeah. And
But
what would you say about the fact that both monsters, like a subplot that is sort of a key part of the latter half of their films, are both done via their blood tests, which not only is it that both the subplots aren't directly related to the monsters and that it's they themselves are a danger, but it's more of a sub element of the monsters. In the Rhedosaurus case, it's the disease in its blood, and in the case of 98, it's the fact that it has offspring.
Mm, I think it would be fair to say, yeah, they are on par with each other.
Mm-hmm. And I would say the last one would also be the fact that both creatures end up dying due to being trapped within different structures, which is also just an interest. We could say it's an interesting coincidence, or we could also say that because the film is borrowing more from what could be argued as a somewhat more realistic monster movie in the Rhedosaurus case, but anything arguable
yeah,
on that point?
I guess
I was
I
going to say, just kind of jump in for a second. I was
Yeah.
thinking, would it because I was trying to figure out because we know the guys who created Godzilla '98 didn't really give a damn about the Godzilla lore and stuff. But I was trying to figure out too, would it be also like the reason why they couldn't apply more Godzilla traits to '98 and more of the beast from 20,000 Fathoms is because isn't Beast from 20,000 Fathoms sort of out of copyright now, or is it?
It's still in copyright.
Oh, okay.
So
So I
like
thought, because I thought if it was in public domain, that would have made it easier for them to like apply a lot more from the beast from 20,000 Fathoms as for Godzilla, because Godzilla, as we know, Toho is very, very strict on their rules and guidelines with Godzilla and how he does things. But you know,
yeah, in the case of this is also for the audience in general. When it comes to things in public domain or taking traits from other characters, the issue oftentimes when you have to do like cease and desist because characters share similar names or appearances to other monsters, it is usually because the property you are working on infringes on or directly is in competition with the original product. So that because the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms is not only just an old film as a whole, even if 98 had like ideas like, oh, we use the this monster also has blood, you could be argued that yes, that is an element of the Beast, but also because there are indeed other changes that make the film its own film, that could also be taken up in court as an example of the film not being a copy or copyright infringing. Like copyright, and people, we always like in the fandom, especially when it comes to 98, we like to talk about like, oh, because legally it's this, and that. The legality of things is not as cut and dry as people make it out to be, because it's always
okay.
going to depend on the argument, the court involved, as well as those presiding over it and what they have to say on the matter.
mm.
So
And then
that's always something to take into account. Like for example, the reason why King Kong's rights are a mess is because there were two different arguments given by RKO when they were first in. They first argued with Willis O'Brien over the rights for King Kong and sort of who owned the character versus who owned what part of the property. Versus when they later on tried to sue Nintendo and they argued that Donkey Kong was infringing on Kong's rights because of the fact that they brought up examples in a previous court case about why RKO had the rights in this case. That is what later caused Nintendo to win the case and cause the rights issues to become a thing because of the legal precedent set in that court case against Nintendo. But like anything you want to bring up in defense or agreement on any of the bullet points here on the sort of plot synopsises?
Well, when it came to like being trapped in a structure, I wanted to bring up that with 98's case, it is one of the carryovers from I think both the Steve Miner script and the 94 script, where Godzilla is on the bridge and is defeated by missiles of any kind.
In the case of the Devant script, in that case, it is due to the amniotic fluid that brings down Godzilla. In that one, in the minor script, yes, I do, if I recall, yeah. In the minor script, he does go down because of missiles. Although I think there is more to that script. I'd have to just look that one up again. But in the case of either of those scripts in those films, we would then have to look at the rest of those films as a whole to say, oh, then they're also just as close to the Beast as 98 is by that logic, because in the minor script, we do know there's a lot of differences, especially with it actually being ironically closer to Gorgo than the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which if someone was to tell me, oh, it's almost like Gorgo, I'd be like, yeah, sure, okay. If that film ended up being the case, or the fact that Godzilla in that movie still possesses more of his Godzilla traits, unlike 98. And with the Devon script, we also have like the Griffin, the probe bats, and all that, which is very much on Beast from 20,000 Fathoms like.
Yeah, I would agree there, but like it doesn't just it doesn't just stop with like things like the bridge scene. There are other carryovers from the original, like Terry Rossio and Devon scripts, with like the Navy battle, the village scenes, like which are also like some of those were also references to 98. Oh wait, no, 54.
54. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Ellie, in the village scene, that would definitely be closer to 54. But in 98's case, what would you say is sort of the village carryover? Is it because when they hit Jamaica and that area?
Well, I mean,
or would you say like?
Well, when it comes, well, I guess just like the more so the aftermath of the village scene in 98 compared to the aftermath of the village scene in 54, where it's kind of beat by beat similar, where we have them come in, like the scientists come in, they find the footprints, and then like they start to deduce like what exactly happened. And then,
well, I guess like we could say that that's on screen, sure. But then we could also say in the case of Beast, we have something similar where it's more overt in 54 and 98, whereas in the case of Beast, it's the destruction of the lighthouse, the destruction of another ship, and just random sightings across like the ocean of seeing the Rhedosaurus when they finally then see it for the first time.
And I would also say that if we're going by like plots on like what beats they do, 98 I would argue has more plot beats similar to 54. When it comes to the buildup of when we see Godzilla, how he's revealed, versus the Beast, where it isn't as built up. Like we still see the Beast in plain view, even if it's like in darkness or shadow. Like we still see
snow and stuff.
Yeah, the snow's there, and then the rain, but it's not as built up as 98 or 54, where their appearances are held back. We only see parts of their body, or we hear them.
I could say that's fair, sure. I would say like the technique of hiding the monster until a full reveal, that's something that 54 and 98 share, even if on a plot level, 98 and B share more in common. Because I would also say that in the case of we can also, if you want, we can if there's nothing else we really want to talk about when it comes to similarities or closeness between one script or the other, we can go into talking about like the characters.
Sure.
Okay. GP, anything you want to talk about with the closest of the scripts, or because you hadn't seen these, you can't really add much?
Well, basically, from what I have seen of like this is Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, even though I have not seen that in the actual movie, I've like caught glimpses of it and even watched a video stating about they reckon, as I think given you put in your description or title, saying that basically, as a YouTuber did a video, he stated that they reckon that 98 was basically just a reboot of the Beast of 20,000 Fathoms. But I don't think that really is the case. There is precedence, even by what you've written out, there's precedence to say that they are totally individual monsters. Like, you can't really compare 98 to the Beast of 20,000 Fathoms, the Heratosaurus. You can't really compare the two because they have a different backstory. There is a bit more difference to it as opposed to saying they have a similar, they're the same sort of thing. I'm like, no. First of all, the Godzilla 98 was mutated like a mutated iguana, whereas the actual Heratosaurus was supposed to be like like a dinosaur that was actually woken up by the atomic blast, as far as I'm aware of.
Mhm.
So there is a big difference. Same thing with Godzilla. I think wasn't there a thing in one Godzilla movie called Godzillasaurus?
Yeah, that's in King Ghidorah, but that's also a different
Yeah.
Godzilla. So
Yeah. That was Heisei, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Heisei, yeah, Godzilla. Yeah. So a different thing again. But the point is they're trying to point to like saying Godzilla is a dinosaur, similar to what Heratosaurus being a dinosaur. So
Mhm.
But here's another thing. Another era as well. In Destroy All Monsters, I believe Godzilla attacked New York as well. Wasn't that
Yeah.
the case? Yeah, so technically speaking, all versions of Godzilla have attacked New York at this point.
Well, a lot of Godzillas have attacked New York at this point.
Yeah, and the same with Beast. Like the Beast actually didn't the Beast here attack New York as well, or was that?
Yeah, it attacks New York.
Yeah. So it's funny how all these three guys did have that in common as well. That they all attacked New York, technically.
Yeah.
At some point. So that was rather interesting to add to the similarities. As well as similar backstories, but then there is a bit of a divergence between all three, So that's
they're all unique, but it's less that one is a carbon copy, but more one strays closer than the others to one.
Yeah. So would you say that that the Beast has more in common with 98 as opposed to Godzilla?
Yeah, that's my position. While Vix is more 98 is closer to 54.
Yeah. Okay. Well, like I said, until I've actually seen the Beast, I'll have to compare the two. But from what I understand, I sort of come on your side this time, man, by stating I think the Beast was supposed to be more. 98 was sort of more based on the Beast than actual Godzilla himself. Mind you, though, there was also a rumor stating the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. That's what actually was what Godzilla was based on. But
oh no, that's definitely not a rumor. That's very much true because, for example, the original title for Godzilla was a giant monster from 20,000 miles under the ocean. So, yeah, we know that there's similarities, but we're seeing because we know Rhedosaurus influences Godzilla, whether or not 98 is just because it takes so much away from what Godzilla is, it is closer to Godzilla's influence than Godzilla itself.
But mind you, though, wouldn't that also then, with that logic, though, wouldn't that stipulate that basically Godzilla 98 was even more closer to the roots than even the people actually realized? If you think about
in that case, I would say it's more closer to roots in the fact that it's more just paying more homage to the film that influences Godzilla. Sure, I would say that's true. But does it then mean that it's closer to Godzilla on the thematic level that makes Godzilla special? I wouldn't say so in that case.
Oh, okay.
But moving over, we're moving just to characters.
Yeah, okay, here we go.
So in the case of because I added all these characters because a lot of them have a little bit of an overlap. In the cases of Beast and Godzilla, we have two important scientists in the cases of Yamane Serizawa for Godzilla, and then Tom and Elson for Beast, and then we have Nick on the side. So it's interesting that both of those films have two different scientists involved, and in both cases, two of those scientists die, Serizawa and Elson. However, one thing that's shared across Yamane, Tom, Elson, and Nick is that all three of them see the creature up close, but they also all do not want to kill the monster. They want to study it. In the case of Nick as a protagonist, because he's not as close to Yamane, he takes a far more active role in the plot, and it makes him more similar to Tom, who also takes far more of an active role in the film. And he also is more involved with the love interest in the film. In Tom's case, it's Lee, and in Nick's case, it's Audrey. And they are both key in helping kill the monster at the end of the film. In Tom's case, he is what helps the shooter find the spot and specifically why it's important. And in Nick's case, it is through him helping out with the military to sort of find a way to trap him. Although, honestly, that's more O'Neill's plan. But Nick still is key in stopping the monster. Well, in the case of Elson, he is closer to Yamane. However, he is closer to Serizawa in the fact that he dies. And Serizawa's effect of killing the monster is far more profound than either Tom's or Nick's. But there are just smaller details between Nick and Tom that makes them closer as characters, rather than Serizawa or Yamane are to Tom or Elson, or Serizawa or Yamane to Nick.
Yeah. But there's one you're missing, man.
I know exactly who you're gonna say. Say it and let me see if I'm right.
Wasn't it Raymond Burr?
Well, we were talking specifically about the original 54. We're not talking about King of the
Yeah.
Monsters. So just original Gojira, not King of the Monsters.
Ah.
And I'm actually
Yeah.
surprised. I wasn't thinking Raymond Burr. I was actually thinking of Ogata, but Ogata
Yeah.
has very little in common with either Tom or Nick, so that's why I didn't include him on the list.
Okay, because I thought Raymond Burr would have had more of a closer to the American side of things. So that's
Yeah. But I was also saying the case, even if let's even say, even if we include Burr in this list, he's not really similar. He's far off from Tom. And that also makes Tom more closer to Nick. And although Burr's a reporter like Audrey, that still would make him less similar than the other male protagonists in any of these films, honestly. And Ogata and Emiko are still far more present in being key in stopping Godzilla than Burr is, although Burr is part of helping convince Emiko to tell Serizawa to use the oxygen destroyer. But again, I would say that Tom is on a plot beat why is closer to Nick than Yamane or Serizawa or Ogata or even Burr are to Nick.
Fair enough.
But also, what would you say, Vic? Because I know you may have on that.
I guess in seeing the list, I would say for a similarity between like Yamane and Nick would be like they're probably the ones that give the most insight on the creature. In that sense.
Well, in that case, I would also say that Elson would also be a part of that as well.
Oh yeah.
But that would also just mean Elson's closer to Yamane, although in that case, the only thing that would be what he shares with Yamane, and then the thing he shares with Serizawa as he dies. But in terms of characters, it would be argued to say that Nick embodies both Elson and Tom more than Yamane does Elson and Tom, or Serizawa to Tom, or Burr or Ogata to either of those characters.
And then does Tom not want to kill the monster?
He doesn't want to kill the monster because he views it as a scientific discovery of the century. It's only after he decides that it's important to kill the monster.
And also, correct me if I'm wrong too. Nick Totopoulos, his last name Totopoulos, wasn't that named after one of the guys who was like one of the guys who was actually working on
the designer? Yeah,
the guy who designed the Godzilla 98. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. But would you say there's any other similarities for these characters at least, Vicky, you want to bring up that I missed that would bring Nick closer to the 54 characters, or no?
No. I mean, other than like, I think I guess yeah. I only like adding for Yamane and Nick, like they're the ones who like just give the most insight on Godzilla and what he is, and like
but then also that would still make Nick a more of a combination of Tom and Elson than it would just Yamane, because Nick like Tom is also the protagonist, so that would be another thing to bring them over. But I can argue and say definitely sure. And I told Monster Long twice. That's what happens when you are really tired, folks.
Mm-hmm. Busy day, huh?
But oh yeah, definitely. But any other things you think would bring Nick closer to the 54 characters, Vic, in your mind, or do you want to move over to the female characters?
Let me think.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I guess. Well, off the top of my head, like what gets me thinking is, I would say, I want to say like relation to Godzilla, because I know for Nick, with Nick being an anti-nuke activist and like a biologist who studies animals directly affected by radiation, and then compare that to like with Yamane, who he was like a paleontologist, right?
he was a paleontologist, but he wasn't like directly saying like we shouldn't like drop the bombs or anything because of their effect on the environment, except like right at the end of the movie where he's talking about like nuclear testing.
Yeah. And then I don't know if that would how much, or if we can use that as a talking point, or what
Well,
would
we
you
could
say?
say if we say that because Nick is a biologist, that would just mean that would be another point for Elson being closer to Yamane in the case where they're both paleontologists. Um, well, Nick's a biologist, so if we're talking about fields, Elson's closer to Yamane in that case. But then it really doesn't necessarily make what's it called like Elson being closer to Yamane. It still makes Tom and Elson a more combination of Nick than Nick a essentially a new Yamane.
Okay.
But any other points you think would be important to bringing up?
Not that I can think of right now. No.
Nothing you can think of. Okay. Moving over to the female characters. So just Emiko, Lee, and then Audrey. I didn't include Elsie for
Yeah, I was gonna say
because technically we could say Elsie, but then like the only similarity Elsie has to any of these characters is the fact that one, she's a woman, and two, she is a paleontologist like Lee. And I think that would be a cheap shot to say, oh, 98 is just like Beast. They both have female paleontologists, so I'm not going to include it. Just to steel man the position that 98 isn't closer to the Beast in 54. In the case of all three movies, they are a love interest to a character. However, the combination of colors is what is shared between them. So the one thing that's shared between Lee and Audrey is that Lee and Audrey are both love interests to the protagonist, and Emiko and Lee are similar to the fact that they both lose someone important to them. In Lee's case, it's Elson, and in Emiko's case, it's Serizawa. All three of them are closely related to or involved with scientists, and all three of them are key in moving the story forward. So essentially, with the female characters, they all are they're not the same as one another, but they all share very similar roles throughout their films.
Yeah, and we also had what was it, Lucy as well, Animal's girlfriend as well, but that doesn't really count either.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that counts because like then she's just a unique character that really doesn't have a share between 54 or Beast.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like a generic character. Yeah, fair enough.
Not necessarily generic, just like a different character that doesn't fill this archetype.
Yeah, fair enough. I'll go with you.
Well, one thing I want to bring up when it comes to like Emiko and Audrey is would be something I've heard before in other 98 discussions is like I would say both involve revealing a secret that connects or like has something to say about Godzilla or stopping Godzilla.
Well, in Emiko's case is revealing the oxygen destroyer to Ogata and having him go over. Well, in Emiko's case, not Emiko's case. In Audrey's case, it is it's more Kamen's doing in the first case where she loses Nick, but in the second case, it's revealing to the world that the babies are a thing too. However, I wouldn't even say that in we could say that, sure. We could add that as a point for Emiko and Audrey's case, but that would mean that the female character of these films is closer to 54 than it is to Beast, but then that would still mean its leading protagonist is still closer to Beast than 54. So 1 for 1.
Well, the one thing I like to say, the Miko character because I watched, like I said, the Raymond Burr version as well as also the classic version, the 954 version from the Japan version. So I liked her character because she seemed like a competent character, but like not much of a damsel in distress, but rather more of a victim of circumstance. Whereas back in the day, you know, a lot of the women characters, especially in the European thing, was like the whole damsel in distress drag, but she didn't actually fit that persona. She fit like this woman who was like a victim of circumstance, as opposed to the the women thing, oh yeah, help me, save me trope that was going on with a lot of the women characters at the time. So the way I feel like Miko embodied more of a woman who was like involved in the whole thing, but due to circumstances, that's the reason why she was sort of like running, yelling, screaming, all that sort of stuff. It was more to do with the circumstances as opposed to just a generic, help me, save me kind of character, which I thought was pretty.
Yeah, I would say like none of these characters are really damsels in distress, so like that could be something that's shared across them all. But then
mind you, though, Audrey on the other hand did do a bit of a dumb blonde kind of trope as well, like the idea of giving up the information to the bloke. Her senior, as I saying, like I
wouldn't even say that's her being dumb. I think that's just like her being like, because people know this about me. I don't consider Audrey to be that good of a character ethically. I think that what she does is it shows the fact that like she was ready. She didn't really care about Nick to begin with, and it's just the circumstances that allow her to feel this attraction to him again. And if none of this ever happened with Godzilla, and let's just say Nick was involved with like nuclear spills or something on the news, she would have simply gotten if for example, if she met him again in New York and she got the same information, if it didn't involve like the world being in danger and Nick was just kicked off the team, then she would have lost Nick. She may have had her sob story and stuff like that, but like she wouldn't have like gone back to help him or anything like that.
Yeah, I know that's the same. Like that's what I'm saying. Start off with this sort of like dumb blonde joke kind of like thing, like the usual trope that a blonde woman is stupid. That was kind of like a trope back in the 80s and 90s.
Because I would still. I think. What do you want to say?
So they played that up a little bit. And then they sort of dropped that, and I sort of love that, like you were saying, man, where they sort of dropped that trope, and it was like, ooh, this is not really good. So they dropped it, and they sort of moved on to making her Audrey a little bit more smarter. Like example of saying, "It's Godzilla, you moron," That was a classic line from Audrey, and I just love that. It's like, when the guy said, we know now the monster is attacking the city is called Godzilla. And she's like, no, it's Godzilla, you moron. That was classic. That's a classic line from Audrey, and I love that. And from there on, I think after that line, from there on, she, like you said, become a little bit more like smarter and then, basically adapted to the situations that were thrown her way, as opposed to, again, being, like I said, like all three of these women seem to be like strong female characters. Would that be the case as well?
Well, I'd say that they're competent characters. Like they're undersold. I could say like they, to a point, some of them could be argued that they like had their characters undersold, but like I wouldn't say that. But Vic, I think you were gonna say something either for or against.
Well, I think I would have to go against both of you guys when it comes to like Audrey as a character, because she's one of my like low key favorite characters. I think is one of the better ones. Just because like I think her character conflict of like having to choose between like Nick and then her career, and then how her friends and what she sees makes Cayman successful comes into her character conflict throughout the film.
Yeah, but the issue I have with that is that fundamentally the only reason why really Audrey is sad later about Nick is because, one, she's directly confronted with the consequences of her actions, but also because she didn't actually get the break she wanted. It's because she got screwed over by Cayman. Had she actually gotten the scoop, I don't think she would have been as repentant as she was, especially because of the fact that even before the film has taken place, Audrey left Nick without like saying anything. So I would say that just because the incredible situations happen is why Audrey gets to have the soft spot for Nick again, which I feel like it doesn't make her a character who I believe deserves a happy ending with Nick, specifically because any of the action she does doesn't justify the ethical faults in her as a person.
Well,
similar to how I don't mind Philippe as a character, but I also feel that similarly he isn't necessarily the context of the film does not make him the best looking character overall.
Yeah, perhaps, but to the Audrey part, I would agree in the sense that like yes, like her actions are like I guess like unethical, but like that's to the point of her character conflict where yes, she would have like gone on if she got the scoop, but I think that's sort of like the point when it comes back to like, oh, she realizes that it was a mistake, and then she goes immediately to try to apologize to Nick.
Well, she knows
And
it's a
even
mistake because she got screwed over, not because she actually got what she wanted, and she realized that no, the love for the man she had was more important. That is the issue I have with that character. So, like, hypothetically, if she got in the scoop and she felt like she was on top and she was happy with everything, and then she saw like Nick and something, and he's like still angry with her, but like everyone's congratulating her because of what she did, then I would be like, okay, that's fine. She actually got to see that what she wanted wasn't worth it, and she lost someone she loved over it. But in Audrey's case, she didn't get what she wanted, and she didn't get Nick either. So she got messed over in both ways, and that's why she's upset about it. From what I can see, is because of the fact that after Nick confronts her, and she lost the scoop. That's why I think is a key that's a key problem I have with her, and I feel that her character conflict isn't that special.
Yeah.
Where, like, for example, like with at least with Philippe's case, like the man literally commits espionage throughout the entire film. However, because of the fact that like he explains that he, as a patriot, that he wants to do everything he can to stop one, a problem from happening again, but also just because he's a patriot, so he's doing it for purely nationalistic reasons. I would say, okay, sure, that explains his character, and therefore that makes his character consistent. And although there's things to abhor about that, I would say that, okay, that at least makes him a good character in that aspect. Well, with Audrey, I don't see it that way.
Yeah, and if you think about Audrey's a bit more, like I said, more just by listening from what you guys were saying. From what I gather, Audrey's sort of based on more selfish motivations as opposed to the other two. Yeah.
Yeah, she's definitely more selfish. However, a lot of people always say that, well, I mean, look at who she's working with. Can you blame her for being selfish? Just because you're in bad situations does not excuse you from committing bad actions yourselves.
Well, I would say she isn't excused from it. Like, she does bad behaviors because she's influenced by these outside sources, and like it bites her, it bites her in the butt again. And I think if she had gotten the scoop, and if she had a scene with the same scene with Nick, like if she just walked out like all celebratory, but she saw Nick leaving, I think we would have gotten a similar scene to that where she still lost Nick.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying is like if the scene changes and she actually realizes that, wow, getting the scoop isn't worth it, then sure, I could say that a character moment for her would be better. But in this case, it's not. It's primarily because of the fact that one, she didn't get the scoop, and then she also found out, oh yeah, came and stole her scoop. But even at the end of the movie, it's because she helps Nick, you could say, as what she gets to earn her big break.
Yeah, her redemption arc.
As a quote unquote redemption arc. But in the end, she doesn't really do right by Nick, especially because of the fact that like the situation is the way it is because of her. And it could be argued that even if she wasn't there, they could have gotten out anyway.
Well, I think so, but I would argue that it's a good redemption because she redeems herself by proving the theory, Nick's theory, that she exposed and got him fired for and discredited as. I think it's a good redemption because like she reveals the truth.
And well, Nick was already right from the start, so like Nick really didn't necessarily need to be validated, and the only person, like essentially, the mistake she's fixing is that, oh, I kind of screwed you over, but here, let's go through all this extra legwork to make the person who was already validated again. Because at the point when the Kamen reveals the military information about Godzilla, Hicks was standing up for Nick and had trusted him to make the good decision on this against his supervisors. So it wasn't like Nick was viewed as like this discredited or unbelieved source. Hicks, who was in charge of the situation, trusted him to make decisions. So really, essentially, Nick has to do a lot more legwork and be put into an exceptionally dangerous situation to have a problem fixed caused by the very woman who he's there with.
Yeah, but so there was a big question about the thing. So who was actually responsible for the leak? You know, technically speaking, was it actually?
It is.
I know that. But like, if the that boss bot Hicks you're talking about, if he didn't leak it to Topoulos, then Topoulos would not have leaked information to Audrey. Then
Well,
so he
no,
would actually
Nick didn't get it leaked to him because Nick was part of the team to find and find and kill Godzilla. So it wasn't leaked to him. Like he didn't come across this
Nick
information.
made the discovery.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. So basically, so that means that, like I said, those two guys, they're Nick and of course the army soldier dude. Those guys. So they'd be free from it. So basically, if there was anyone who was going to be up for having the issue of leaking information, that would be Audrey and the boss.
Because Cayman saw Audrey.
Yeah, Cayman. Yeah,
and then he stole the scoop.
Yeah, but he stole the scoop. But here's the thing: is that if he stole the scoop, it essentially, even if Cayman hadn't taken it, Audrey would have still leaked it anyway. So the only difference is that it's now Cayman who does it, and Audrey doesn't get the scoop she wanted, and then she also doesn't get the man she wanted. So it's not even just what I wanted wasn't really what I actually wanted. It's more the actions I took didn't work out the way I wanted to, and now I'm gonna screw up with the same man I was with again, and still get what all of the things I wanted in the end.
Well, I would say it's more so that like she realizes that her actions were the incorrect actions because the same thing was done to her, and that's why she realizes that she has to apologize to Nick for taking the tapes.
So here's another thing. If like I said,
well, again, like what's it called?
Cayman had not leaked. I was going to say, if Mr. Cayman had not leaked her story, then basically would that make still Audrey worse or better?
It would still make Audrey just as bad because actually to make it worse because she probably would have gotten a lot of praise for leaking that to like her circle of friends. Yeah, but that also still screws over Nick. So if anything, it would make her even worse in the film.
So would that make her redemption arc a lot harder to do if it wasn't for Mr. Cayman actually leaking it? That's what I'm saying. Would have made the redemption arc a lot more difficult to try and explain away why she shafted Nick, and then
it would make it better because in that case, because she did actually achieve the goal she thought she wanted, the consequences for achieving that goal become apparent, and therefore it makes her choosing to actually fix that mistake more impactful because she realizes that, hey, what I did was wrong, and I'm actually gonna do some things. I don't care too much about the story. I want to just help, because in the end, ultimately, she still gets her scoop. If Audrey got away without actually getting the scoop, then I'd say, okay, sure, that would have been a good choice. But in the movie, it's not the case.
Yeah, fair enough.
And
but,
then I guess if is that the end of that tangent? Because I have one more thing I want to bring up.
Yeah, no, GP. Any thing else on your you want to bring up on that tangent before we switch over?
Well, pretty much like I said before, I felt like basically I still feel Emiko and Lee was probably, from what I've gathered from the research we've just been reading up on these guys and what we've been saying, that they were more competent than Audrey in a way. just saying.
Mm-hmm.
They seemed more competent,
I guess.
Yeah. And also one other thing, just before we go on from the monsters as well, did the beast from basically the Heratosaurus actually have fire breath like Godzilla 98 was supposed to have? Or
no, they don't have any. It has no breath weapon at all.
Okay, just to clear that up. Okay, now we can move on.
Yep. And I guess the one thing I want to bring up with Emiko and Audrey is both have scenes where they run away from Godzilla and the male lead carries them away.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
New way to live as a point. And obviously, since you brought that up, you also wanted another had another tangent you want to bring up. What would that be, Vic?
Oh no, that was the other point that they both.
That was the other
similar
point.
Scenes that were shot in overall similar ways.
Okay, got you. Yeah. That's fair. Okay. Outside of because I don't have a specific screen for this, but would we want to talk about like tertiary characters and the like, or no?
Other side characters?
Yeah.
Well, that's completely up to you. It's your show, man.
Well, no. I'm just asking because, like, do you think there would actually be any relevance there, Vic, or that would make 98 closer to 54, or no? Because the one point I would bring up is that this is probably just unintentional, but we do see that there's far more of a military like character presence in Beast and 98 than 54. But that's such a non-point that I don't feel that there's much reason to actually bring it up.
Fair enough.
I guess anything else would be like cinematic parallels, like visual references and other stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Which ones would you want to bring up for those then?
Okay, aside from like the Emiko and Audrey having that scene with Godzilla, I guess like when it comes to like comparing the Godzilla walking to the electrical wires, and then Godzilla walking into the second fish trap. Like I think
Sure.
those scenes are parallels.
Interesting.
In that case, we could also say that like the Rhedosaurus and 98 have very similar initial attacks, especially in the case where a big set piece for 98 is him kind of barreling through a building onto the other side, and we sort of see that happening with the Rhedosaurus as well, where it kind of gets up on its hind legs and barrels through another building that keeps going through that street. We also have the fact that similar to, well, all of them have very low angles to them, so that's not really something we could say is necessarily like a hallmark of one or the other. Although I would also say that in the case of 98 and Beast, I would say that their military fights are also closer than that of 54's military fights.
In a sense, I think so. I'd say there are some cases where Godzilla 98 has more of a initiative in attacking back and having like directly fighting back the military versus the Redosaurus. I would say always usually like stands its ground for a little bit, but eventually runs away.
Well, we could also say that in the case of, although 98 is more like a pop and dive kind of monster, it does kind of have its stand its ground posture moment and then decides to flee, which would still make it closer to Red than it would be to 54. So I guess that would be a point I could bring up in my defense. But we could also say the fact that there are electrical wires used in Redosaurus in 54 that would be a point for 54 versus being closer to Red in that case. The use of military equipment, we already talked about that. I would also say though, especially the deaths of the Rhedosaurus is, I would say, very much closer to 50. Rhedosaurus death is far closer to 98 than it would be to 54 in that case.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I guess I would bring up scenes where I'd say 98 and 54 have more similar scenes of when it comes to depicting the aftermath of the events and like the survivors, like how they perform like tests on the survivors with the Geiger counters, and then there's one scene where like the villagers are on the beach and like they're looking out at like a wreckage, or they're looking out for the survivors and such.
Yeah, that's true too. With the Geiger counter scene, we could also say like when we see the beast blood, when they're doing the test on it, they're doing similar tests to see like what's going on with them. So that could be a tri parallel there as well. And also similar to like how, although it's less like shrouded in shadow, wait until the monster finally appears. The like how we see the ships being attacked for Rhedosaurus and Beast are not Rhedosaurus and Beast. Rhedosaurus and 98 are also very similar versus 54s where it's just like a plume of fire.
Yeah, although when it comes to 98 and the 54, both have, I believe both have like two specific attacks on boats. One with the first one, I think, has some similarities with how we see the crewmen trying to radio out for like a mayday and such, and then um, Godzilla in some way attacks, and then we cut away.
Mhm.
More
Well, like
aggressive.
that's true too. Although, like when we see the ship attack on the Beast, it has a very they all very much are similar. But I would say from a visual standpoint, like how that scene is played out, I would say it's still closer to 54 visually.
Mm. And then I guess one tri parallel I guess I want to say is like all involved like Godzilla's first attack and the Beast's first attack. They all involve them picking up a vehicle and like throwing it back down.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up as like another try example because that is something that they all very much share together. Um, and I would say the Beast is the only example. Well, this is a gigantic stretch, and I wouldn't say this is an actual point, but with Beast and 98, they're both examples of predation on humans. With the case of the Rhedosaurus eating the police officer and the baby Zolls also eating the French Secret Service guys, but I mean, that's they're not really analogous outside of that relationship. So I mean, I don't think it's worth including.
I guess if I want to give you one, I guess 98 and Redosaurus both technically eat people. Although I would bring
Um,
up that legend has it 54 ate the sacrifices.
um, when did are we talking about 98 eating people in the case of the babies or the actual big?
Uh 98 eats the helicopters technically, so people are in them.
Yeah, but again, we both have to twist our arms for that to be true. So in that case, I would say in that case no on no dice on any of them, which is why like the point I brought up, I would say is So
well, here's another thing to add too. When Trendmasters did their release of Ultimate Godzilla, they had the action figure actually eating human action figures. So make that as you will. Mind you, though,
yeah.
I believe wasn't it? Correct me if I'm wrong, but technically speaking, Toho had told the guys, TriStar and those guys, and Matt Emmerich and all those guys told them not to have Godzilla eat people, and yet somehow he still ended up doing it anyway.
Yeah, that's very much one of those examples where they like the restrictions just got super loosened as the film kind of languished in death hell for so long. So that's kind of what ended up being the case where they kind of allowed that to slip by.
Yeah, I say like any deviations to the rules is just like a victim of circumstance.
I would say it's a victim of circumstance, and Emmerich just being like, "Yeah, I want to get off this project." So circumstance and malicious intent and just time.
I would want to debate malicious intent.
The reason I say malicious intent specifically is because of the fact that what's it called? The issue is that Emmerich is exceptionally disparaging against the franchise as a whole. He didn't care for it, and there's a lot of conflicting details about whether or not he actually even liked the first one. There's footage saying, "Oh, like I never liked Godzilla at all." There's lines where he said like, "Oh, well, I like the first one," or I didn't want to do the original. I wanted nothing to do with it. Like the only example of Emmerich being charitable with a franchise has so much confliction around it, while there's a lot of him being disparaging against the franchise as a whole, where I could say that it's more likely that there is malicious intent than there is genuine love for what he did. I think he loved the take on Godzilla he did. I don't argue with that at all. However, I do doubt the validity of any good faith charitability on Emmerich's part. Devlin is a different case, though. I will say that Devlin, especially when it came to the fact that he was very much more disparaging against people who did not like his take originally, but later interviews show that he really pushed Emmerich into doing it. He liked it, or he liked the franchise, and he kind of feels bad about it. That leads me to believe that sure, he may have liked the franchise, although there's also earlier interviews where he was more disparaging of Godzilla. So Emmerich, I would say, not Emmerich. Devlin's a toss up. Emmerich, no.
Mm, I would argue like both, maybe more of a toss up. Um, Only because like I've well, unless you have like certain interviews that like I haven't myself seen, but yeah, I've seen interviews where like Emmerich is very doesn't like clearly states his like indifference or like unfavoritism towards like Godzilla the franchise as then most people knew it, which was like the Showa era, and like
Yeah, the issue with that is that by this point, 84 had come out, and although that film isn't necessarily the most like, it's not like Showa, it's not Showa lighthearted, but it's more lighthearted than the original, and there was already news talk that other Godzilla movies were coming out, although people hadn't seen them in America. So, and not to mention that like the people from Toho had met with these guys before, so the idea that they didn't know anything about like what was going on with Godzilla at the time, it it goes a little bit beyond belief to me in that case. But
I think I would agree, but from what I know in like being in the Godzilla community and hearing from like I guess like older fans, like the Heisei movies in America weren't like the image of Godzilla
well,
at
they
that
weren't the
time.
image. However, that's also fans versus people in the industry who have access, like far more access to like Japan in general
Yeah,
than like we the fans did. Like Delgado talked about some of the Heisei stuff at the time. Obviously, they were given stuff up. They were given like Heisei references as well. So, it like could they be? It could in hindsight could they be like, oh well, when we were talking about the Godzilla series being cheese, we were talking about the Showa stuff. Could they say that in hindsight? Sure. Would I necessarily believe them? No, because with all the material Toho gave you, and you're speaking as broadly as you are, especially because a lot of people are excited for like a new American Godzilla film after like 84, the need to be general in certain aspects and be specific in others just makes me doubt any validity in Emmerich's case, but I still believe Devlin's still a toss up.
yeah. And I mean, when it comes to Devlin, like I think he was more of a fan. Like, I would have
Well,
to
I
say,
believe
like,
he's more of a fan than Emmerich.
yeah,
There's still things conflicting about what he said, especially like looking at the old Sci-Fi Japan article that talks about like the whole making of the American Godzilla movie. That has a lot of conflictions with Emmerich kind of not being as big of a fan as like he says in other articles and the like. But continue.
what would be like the how he says like how they thought it was like a dopey idea, or that they
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be able to do it right.
Well, it wasn't that they couldn't do it. It was just it was a dopey idea.
Well, I mean, I would say that like everybody has something they like that they think is like dopey. Like I would say like one of the things I always see is like people say like Pacific Rim is like the best dumbest movie.
Mm-hmm.
And like I would never say that personally. I don't think Pacific Rim is like dumb in any sense.
I think the reason why, like for example, you then have to like pull back what they mean by when they say dumbest movie because, like the idea that like realistically we'd use giant robots in a military setting is unrealistic. So like making robots to fight monsters doesn't make sense realistically because why don't we just make small nimble aircraft with enough firepower to kill the monsters, stuff like that. That's often why I hear
Mm-hmm.
people say that like things like that is dopey. You just need clarification on that. However, if the argument is that we couldn't do it right, this, and that, considering what DeBont was able to do or what he was offering to do with a traditional faithful god, like a very traditional, pretty faithful Godzilla, it leads me to wonder, and also not to mention what Emmerich and Devlin were able to pull off with Independence Day. It just leads me to wonder what they mean by these statements, and that's why I have so little charitability with them because of so much of the surrounding evidence like that.
Hmm. Yeah, I can see that. But I mean, like, well, I think most Godzilla fans would even say like, well, because they always refer to the Showa versions like even if the Heisei movies were available, talking to like the like I guess by then like Destroyer would have come out, right?
Destroy had come out, and people like obviously there was news articles about it, but that wasn't common. However, for American Devlin, who actually like got to see like the suits for Destroyer, it still just leads me to like just wonder and ask. But
Yeah, and then like I would say those interviews like were referring to, I guess before they even signed on to the project, like when they were first being asked.
well, they were first
Um,
being asked, but let's just say they were first being asked at this point. 84 had come out, Biolante had come out. The little buzz about the Godzilla suit being stolen had done its circles. So like, especially with the resources you have at Hollywood and just like kind of being ignorant about like what's going on in the Godzilla space, if you're being asked to work on a Godzilla product, it does not. There's just so many like holes there where it makes me think that there's no way they aren't being just uncharitable.
mm, I would agree. I would bring up that like if they were given the resources well, I'm sure they more than likely had resources to like other Godzilla films like old and recent.
Well,
Um,
they definitely did because we do know that they got a like Heisei Godzilla material as reference for
and also and also, mind you, that we're going to do a really good one that was sort of. I think you and me have talked about it, Zimcast, about when there was actually like going to be like a precursor to the the Godzilla '98 movie where they had what was it, like the Steven Spielberg kind of version. I can't remember. No, it wasn't Steven Spielberg, but it was the guys who did that.
Stan Winston.
Yeah, the John DeBont Godzilla movie.
That I think that would have been epic if they did that.
Mhm.
There was lots of more qualities with that version of their Godzilla as opposed to '98.
Yeah, and then like they signed up for it after reading that one because
Yeah.
they said that they thought they could do it when they read the Bont version.
Well, that also like if we're saying that they can only do it after they read the DeBont one, that essentially just means that DeBont had to do a lot of the legwork to conceptualize techniques to actually achieve this. But then essentially, with all the legwork DeBont did, they then still go and make a pretty unfaithful depiction. So there is still that. Not to mention like especially when they talk about like how they viewed the Stan Winston design, where they're saying, oh well, it's nice, but we wouldn't do it like that. Except DeBont was going to do it like that, and all of the conceptual work for how to like bring Godzilla to life was done because of him. It just comes across as arrogance on Emmerich's part, which Emmerich is just known for being arrogant, so that's another thing.
Yeah, although like I would say it had to do with like with Emmerich not wanting to do like a Godzilla as he like traditionally originally was, and he
that's another thing though, is that even if we say that it's Godzilla as he traditionally was, the thing a lot of people give the DeBont script a lot of crap for is the fact that Godzilla's origin. So outside of the fact that Godzilla looked more traditional, had his abilities, and fought another monster, a lot of the rest of that script isn't very traditional Godzilla fare.
Yeah, I would even say it's closer in line to something you would see in the Millennium version.
Yeah, the Millennium version or the Monsterverse. Which then it also just shows that like Emmerich's belief that 98 is how a modern Godzilla would have been done, when in like years later we do see that a traditional Godzilla could and was done.
And I agree, to the point where like, yeah, the reason he didn't do that was because he didn't want to. So like to say, I wouldn't agree to say that it was done like maliciously, in the fact that like in the sense that like he wanted to like screw over the fans or screw over.
No, I'm not saying that he wanted to screw over the fans. However, the reason I say malicious is because he did it for his own pride in doing something he wanted to do. It wasn't something he did out of a labor of love for people who were excited to see this property. It was done because he got control of the property and he wanted to do his way with it. And I think anyone who is, especially like artists, developers who are ever getting a hold of a property that isn't theirs, just deciding that what came before or what's important to it doesn't really matter, and you're gonna put your stain on it. And I mean stain on in a sense that it's a bad stain. I just mean putting your mark on it and disregarding everything else. That is a problem. It is very much an ego problem, and I think that a lot of people, even nowadays, too, also still have this issue. Halo 4 is a big example of this. DMC Devil May Cry is another big example of this. Dragon Ball Evolution,
the Star Wars new trilogies,
new Star Wars trilogy, Doctor Who, Halo, the Halo TV series. Because you're like,
many have those issues.
Of course, there's like new people can bring in new ideas. However, there's a reason why there's already fans of a property is because of what's there. So moving away from that so much, it's going to alienate more fans. And even if it brings in more fans, good, it brings in more fans. However, ultimately, even as products, there always going to be competition between these groups to lobby for what the next interpretation is going to be. Like a big issue with the community is that although we have a lot of Godzillas to like, a lot of people have different opinions upon what Godzilla should look like or what he should resemble when it comes to all the different versions. And everyone's trying to get their voices heard so that when the next new product comes out, it's more in line with why they like the series.
I know, to try and make it more faithful to the original.
I'm going to be right back, so I'll let you guys give some spiels while I do something real quick.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. What people would like, I think a lot of more fan base would actually like would be try and stick to more source material references. I mean, it wouldn't like the whole thing wouldn't have to be exactly 100% close to the source material, but like the issue with Luke Skywalker in The Force Awakens and stuff like that, they made him a bit of a jackass. They treated Luke Skywalker like he was nothing, which was a bit disrespectful. Same with I said Godzilla here. Like I said, I love the design of Godzilla 98. The design of Godzilla 98 looks pretty good. I mean, even you can imagine this thing actually almost being a guy in a rubber suit because it carries on so much human-like traits, like the bipedal stance. Like it's a little bit more believable. And there's a really good design. Even Toho itself, okayed the design of Godzilla 98, Zilla, they did sign off on it. So Godzilla 98, from a looking perspective, looked great. So the monster was fine. It was just all the stuff that they added to the storyline that sort of screwed it up.
Yeah, and I guess speaking back to like the thing we were talking about, I guess new creators, I guess not caring about the original source material. I guess coming from my perspective, going back to seeing. Like the debate of is it more so Beast versus 54? I guess as a fan of this, and from what I've read of how Emmerich has said that he took most influences at all, like if at all, from 54, and as a fan from my perspective, I do see those in 98.
Well, I would also say in that case, even in this one spot here where he says I didn't really want to make the original Godzilla. We took the part of the basic storyline where creatures created by radiation and it becomes a big challenge where it gets very sort of brought down as to what they mean by that, but Godzilla technically isn't just created. It's more complicated than that. But when it comes to Rhinosaurus, even though Rhinosaurus isn't created from radiation, fundamentally, a creature that is a result of radiation, or in this case, especially the bomb, and becomes a big challenge, is universal across these films. If we're gonna talk about that, I'd say another big reason why a lot of people say it's closer to Godzilla is because it was allowed to get that name because of the circumstance.
But I would say that with the name of Godzilla, I think it still carries over it still has aspects that lean it
Yeah.
more towards Godzilla
Yeah.
within, I guess, like specifics. I
Yeah.
would say.
Such as, though, that would be my next question. Is then such as.
Well, I guess like some of the other stuff we had talked about earlier with certain story beats, certain elements of the characters of Godzilla and the Beast and 54. Um, just what we talked about before. Like, I would still say that.
Except we've also seen that there's also more, less 54 influences, and if not even more Beast influences as well. Not to mention that because so much of what makes Godzilla is stripped away, even if we can say that there's similar story beats and the like, and although there may be more closer appearance wise, it still leaves 98 not necessarily as a good example of a adaptation for Godzilla, especially when at this point it's not even like Godzilla had it been adapted and remade from 54 when 84 had been a thing, and we would later see 2000 and a lot of other Godzilla movies that would be earlier than 98 and post 98 that could do it and not be closer to the Beast than 98 is in this case.
Mind you, though, that being said,
no one's denying that like they're in like that 98 shares a lot between the two. However, 98 shares a lot between the two when other remakes and adaptations do not. Like 84 is not really close to the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Neither was Shin, Planet of the Monsters, 2014. Even though like we could probably point out a point or two, but in the case of 98, it becomes very glaring and very apparent.
Yeah, but mind you, though, that being said, though, to me, I still, I know you're going to disagree with me again, Zimcast, but I still state that there is, like, people say that basically when 98 Godzilla came out, it took the god out of Godzilla, and I think you just said that. But here's the thing, not really. Like, there are some aspects of a Godzilla thing, such as being immortal, but it's just a different take of being immortal. Like, you see, Godzilla's immortal ability from the Japanese stance is a Godzilla that can't easily be killed. Whereas in the TriStar, actually Godzilla 98 version, its version of being immortal is the ability to rapidly reproduce, thus carrying on like a lineage and thus staying immortal that way. You know.
Well, in that case, also we could say that 98 is closer to Mothra. In that, if we're talking about immortality, in that case, Mothra is more of a lineage monster than Godzilla is. But even then, we wouldn't even say that like that's a uniquely American understanding of that trait of Godzilla's, especially with the MonsterVerse being a thing. So, true. Or the fact that like the Godzilla, the second Godzilla 2000 like movie, the sequel to that movie, which was going to be far more American centric, also like understood that about Godzilla. So that's another issue I take with it, especially because like with both films, although we could say let's say that Godzilla is immortal in 98's case because it can carry on its lineage. That still doesn't discount the fact that it's still vulnerable to conventional weaponry like the Beast, and it is still felled by conventional weaponry like the Beast, trapped in a structure of human ingenuity.
Yeah, but also with the other thing that sort of carried over was, like I said, that sort of gas breath or fire breath kind of thing, as opposed to like the Beast of basically the Ratosaurus that didn't have a fire breath or anything like that.
Well, they have a fire breath, but 98 also needs external materials to produce a fire breath, while Godzilla doesn't. Which that's one point in the other direction, sure. But considering that power is key to what makes Godzilla's theming so important, if we're gonna lay on the fact that 98 has good theming, removing aspects like his vulnerability and his atomic breath, which are key to the thematic understanding of the character, makes the foundation of the argument fall apart.
Yeah, and that's the reason why when they brought out the animated series, that's what made the animated series better, when they actually put those qualities back in. So
exactly, and also with the animated series, we also know that Emmerich and Devlin didn't want those aspects taken back in, which is a further issue I have with the movie, not the series.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like I wish that there was a way they could have actually made like the series version, like the animated series version, into the live action version. Like that would have been almost what all fans would have wanted. I think in the long run. But,
Mm-hmm.
anyway, so we're continuing here. So what's the go here, man?
Well, no, I wasn't sure if it had any other specific points you wanted to say.
Well, no, not particularly. Like I would agree in the sense, where I would only point out that like I guess to what Godzilla Online was saying, but like I would say like perhaps it reinterpreted um what those traits were of like the atomic breath and invulnerability into other things, but like that would be all I can say.
Well, we could say that, but then we also have to look at how fundamentally the those changes affect the theming of the character.
Yeah, I would only point out that like the theme of like Godzilla being able to reproduce quickly and have the ability to like overtake the world, almost like proliferate it in a way, um that is the, I guess, replacement of what the thematic power of Godzilla is, where it can be this like dominating force on the planet if not taken seriously or
But it's not just that Godzilla is like a threat because he's not taken seriously. It's also because of the fact that like the forces that created Godzilla are that domineering. While in the case of 98, because he doesn't carry all over those traits, and if the military just takes a modicum of seriousness with them and uses an inkling of its actual like destructive potential, it can destroy Godzilla in the 98's case. Again, it muddles the theming.
So what's the point we're looking at here on the screen? That's what I was asking.
Oh no, I just left that screen on there specifically. Wasn't like any specific reason.
Oh, okay. Because I think I'm seeing another one here with a like a picture of like a diagram drawing here of the Radasaurus, is it the dinosaur one?
Which this one?
Is
that the one you're talking about?
The drawing.
Yeah,
that one.
Yeah. No, that was just an early concept sketch of the Radasaurus with the as you can see, it was a T-Rex here in the background with them trying to see what they can do to design the Radasaurus. That's just one of those sketches that they did.
That's very nice. I like that. That's pretty cool. Because it makes the Heratosaurus almost look more dragon-like as opposed to, like I said, like Godzilla. Because you could imagine, like I said, with the T-Rex looking stance, that's almost like a representation of Godzilla in the background. You know, that's almost like the way that a lot of people perceived Godzilla being like this sort of standing upright tyrannosaur, as opposed to being this sort of laid-back, like lizard-like, dragon-like thing.
Well, one thing they also wanted to do with the beast originally was they're gonna give it like two heads and stuff, and they had other designs where it was like very more cartoony looking, but like I get what you're trying to say.
And then I guess if he with this concept art, I guess if you want to go into like the creations of the design and like the concepts and how all the designs evolved into what they became. Because like
sorry. I just noticed in this design too. Sorry, man, for cutting you off. But I was also noticed in the design of the Heratosaurus, they originally gave it ears, and I think also with the Godzilla 1954, they gave it ears too, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was trying to figure out what was the idea of giving a reptile ears when basically modern day reptiles don't actually even have ears. They have like
that's like the anachronistic design you talk about, right, Sim?
Yeah.
No, I think like definitely it's very anachronistic. Older dinosaur designs didn't have ears necessarily, but I think like because the Rhedosaurus wasn't always envisioned as just a dinosaur, I think it makes sense for it to have ears. And in the case of 54, I think it's a similar deal where maybe just the idea of ears transitioned over onto 54, although we do see a lot of anachronisms with all the with both the Rhedosaurus and the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms when we look at them in hindsight from this year.
And then like I guess I will also point to that 98 still carries over that into its design process, with it having more both like humanoid and mammalian traits, with like
But
like the
it
back.
definitely has like a humanoid body structure, but it also still is trying to be modern, though, in the sense of like because Emmerich felt that this isn't how we do it, we need to make it like this now instead of Godzilla, who even though for a while had remained relatively unchanged, still kept to what made the design Godzilla.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure Godzilla 98 didn't actually have ears. Like,
No.
so that was another
Yeah,
interesting.
it was overall more reptilian because that's the direction
Yeah,
they wanted to go with it being
yeah.
more realistic, which we see in other Godzillas, with the 84 before it, and then
2014.
Monsterverse. Yeah, they are overtly reptilian.
Mm.
But like I guess that what makes this one unique is the more humanoid mammalian aspects of it. I
Yeah.
say mammalian because like the legs are like based on horses, and then the feet being like ostrich like, theropod like.
Well, I would say if we're saying that the feet are like birds, it's essentially saying that like dinosaurs. So,
Yeah.
Mm.
but
So I'm just trying to figure out from a design point, why would someone shove ears on a reptile? That's the one thing I couldn't understand. Like with Godzilla and Heratosaurus here, why would anyone put ears on a thing supposed to be generically a reptile? Why? What would
well,
the
I'd say like
purpose?
in a lot of like Western depictions of like reptilian like fictional creatures, that's like kind of like expected to see traits that aren't necessarily derived from reptiles. Like if you look at really old dragon depictions across the world, that's something that you see a lot of.
Oh, with the ears. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to figure that out. What was the purpose of it? But yeah, that makes sense. You know, like
Yeah.
trying like more dragon like with the whole ears and stuff. Yeah, I get you.
Mm. Which is
Yeah.
like the same, like I guess, design philosophy that the Topless put into the 98, which like he said in interviews he wanted this to be overall more dragon like.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Well, it looks. We could say, in hindsight now, with how dinosaurs have changed, it's become more dragon-like, but it's still very much trying to be not a monster. Still trying to be like a dinosaur in the sense of what we know dinosaurs as. Well, though Godzilla resembled dinosaurs at the time, even when dinosaurs changed, Godzilla did not change because what that is Godzilla.
Because the bipedal stance become iconic to that character, isn't
Yeah,
it?
and that's what made the character look the way it did.
Mm. Whereas the horizontal stance, which is what 98 has, I still find that very cool as well. You know, I wonder what Godzilla would actually look like if he was in a horizontal position. You know, would that actually affect the character differently? You know, I don't know.
That's why 98 exists.
Yeah.
That's what 98's for.
Yeah, but I mean, taking that perspective and then transforming it into like, you know, let me see. Zimcast, I'll send you a photo of what I'm sort of roughly talking about. Just give me a second. Because I think a lot of mods who are doing it on you know, Jurassic World Evolution were doing something along those lines.
Mm.
Yeah, so I'll find it.
And I guess I would just bring up what I wanted to say with the Godzilla 98 design is like even though yes, like the horizontal stance and the overall like aesthetic is like a modern dinosaur, but like I argue that 98 like isn't just a big T-Rex or a generic dinosaur. Like there are the initial the iconistic aspects of it, and the like overall design philosophies put into it like make it more than just like a dinosaur.
Well, it's definitely more than just a dinosaur. However, as a product of being a take on a known character, that's where the issue lies. Where if like again, if it hadn't been the product of a reinterpretation of a character with a established design, then it probably wouldn't be as big of an issue. Which is why even if we were gonna say that 98 is a remake of Beast, that would still be an issue where they are taking a really interesting design in the Beast and changing it. Excuse me, into 98.
Yeah, and I would say given that it isn't like just a replication of the Rhedosaurus, it puts it more in favor to Godzilla 54, considering it's still a bipedal dinosaurian, specifically like a T-Rex.
Yeah, well,
Take
no, we've also said that too, but that also still doesn't discount it from the other issues that
Yep.
it
So there we go,
presents.
man. So there you go, Zimcast. I'll send you the things on Facebook to show you what I was talking about.
Yeah, I see it.
It's that design there. So I was trying to figure out, would that, this kind of version of Godzilla, like, like that, like, what, that wouldn't that be also be a better consider? I don't know.
The issue with that is like that is also where you take the thing where it's very much I can tell which dinosaurs it's based off of,
Yeah.
and then adding very very Godzilla looking spines to it, which then in a way kind of adds to the idea that Godzilla is just a dinosaur with spines on top of it, which I think works for some people, but for myself and for a lot of fans that just isn't necessarily like what they're looking for.
Because I thought that design sort of worked, but then I'm thinking, does actually Godzilla standing upright give the character? There we go. There's a bit.
Yeah, like even something like this too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like so taking it from like the horizontal position to that sort of position. Wondering, would that really affect the character the way he's designed? Like, would that actually affect the character as opposed to standing upright, as opposed to being horizontal? Would that actually affect the character the way he's portrayed, or
I think it affects how definitely it's apart from the character, but then also you have to say, what other traits of it allow it to then be more traditional, or like does it still carry over abilities or backstory stuff like that? Because they all add together to make Godzilla. So like if we see a horizontal Godzilla like this, then we need to see like, oh, what about is traditional and in line with the character, what isn't, and go from there.
So it becomes a little bit more complicated to figure out what is and what isn't Godzilla.
It just comes down to like taking everything in scope and looking at it from a macro level. But
yeah, because just masking as a T-Rex wouldn't really work, because that's not exactly the way it's supposed to work. Godzilla is actually like a mutational monster, so I suppose wouldn't the bipedal stance also carry over from the genetic mutation, even if it was a dinosaur that was supposed to be horizontal? That the whole idea of it slightly becoming vertical would be from like what mutation was actually done to it via the nuclear thing as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the case of Godzilla 54, it was already horizontal, vertical before it got exposed to the bomb. But in 98's case, since it's a result of a iguana being mutated, it's more or less that the back legs mutated more to support weight, which in like the world building aspect, there's nothing from a world building standpoint that justifies Godzilla not being vertical.
Well, there was a talk about, if Godzilla was standing vertical, all the weight would be put on his body stance. So, like, that's the reason why they come across that whole mythos about, that's the reason why Godzilla couldn't exist, because if he tried to walk on land, his knees would buckle and he'd basically...
Well, it's also just size alone with square cube law.
Like, that's the saying, all the weight... But I'm thinking, if the weight distribution was different, being horizontal as opposed to being vertical, that would make things a little bit more easier, would it not?
Not necessarily, because if you're horizontal, there are certain biomechanical limits that bipedal animals can get to, especially horizontal. Like, there's a reason why Spinosaurus is longer than T-Rex, and it's because of how it distributes its weight. Yeah. And then even looking at bipeds that, animals that can be bipeds, like hadrosaurs, which also dwarf tyrannosaurs in weight and in length, they also are quadrupedal versus completely bipedal. But yeah.
And then I just sent over these see if we could get a point of discussion going.
Oh, there we go. There's some nice ones too. Yeah.
Yeah, like I would say in this case, where we do see Godzilla's still super skinny, but like in this case, at least we do still see the atomic breath being used. And hypothetically, let's just say atomic breath also implies immunity to conventional weaponry. Then there you go. You're more in line with Godzilla, which is why people like the Godzilla series more. that it doesn't discount like my issues I have with the design overall, but it means that character wise you then are in line. But
so if we talk about Godzilla 98 in this horizontal position, would that also, like I said, make that like I said, change the way the character is viewed? Like if it was standing upright as opposed to being in its horizontal position, would that also have changed the way people thought
it
about
changes, but then we also have to look at it in conjunction with everything else. So like horizontal Godzilla, atomic breath, immunity, conventional weaponry. Is there one problem there? Yes, him being horizontal. Does he have other important things? Yes, the immunity to conventional weaponry, atomic breath. Then yes, we'll excuse this one bad thing and support these good things. For example, the fact that like 2014 Godzilla doesn't have ears, doesn't really have like traditional good spines. Breath is not necessarily the same, but like because so much is very good, or like Origin, that's another big one. But again, because so much is good there, we can excuse things there. Yeah, like that.
There we go. That's what we're talking about. That version. Yeah. Like the dorsal plates were really weird on the first when it first was brought up. Mind you, they did fix that for, I think, was it King of the Monsters? They actually fixed the actual design and look at the spines when they did that.
Yeah, they just look very much just like a 54. But overall, because we're coming up just under 2 hours, and it's almost one for me.
Yeah, so exactly. So we might as well try and continue through this summary you got before we wrap it up.
Oh no, I already gave my summary. I was just gonna see if we can give our closing thoughts. We'll do you first, and then Vic, and then I'll do myself.
So closing thoughts. Well, again, closing thoughts on this whole matter. Well, thanks for having me on panel, man. It's been great just hanging out with you guys. And who was this other guy that was on panel with us?
Vic.
Vic, nice to meet you, Vic.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, cool. But back so this point here with the thing. I think, well, I said, what I think's hilariously funny is that with Beast of 20,000 Fathoms is that, like I said, that's what sort of inspired Godzilla as well. And so when they took like some ideas from 20,000 Fathoms to put to Godzilla 98, they're trying to stay less faithful to what people know as Godzilla, not realizing that it was actually being more truthful to what they had originally envisioned anyway. So that's a bit ironic. And also coming down to the point, I still believe that, while Godzilla 98 isn't like, the best version of Godzilla or Godzilla movies, to me, I still feel like it does sort of capture like elements of Godzilla, but then you could say that about any kind of Godzilla parody out there too. Like there's traits of Godzilla inside a parody, like to make fun of Godzilla. There are some elements there, but it doesn't carry all the likeness of Godzilla. The same with this version of Godzilla 98. There was lots of things that it didn't carry over, but there was to me there's still a little bit there to sort of like hint towards a more Godzilla-like aspect to this version. Like there is an aspect to Godzilla here. So when Toho sort of write it off and say, "Oh, we're just going to change it and call it Zilla now," I think that's a bit of an insult because this version of Godzilla did have a lot of good traits. And even like I said, when you also incorporate the comics and the animated series into the Godzilla 98 universe, it sort of shows that there is a bigger, broader spectrum to the Godzilla 98, which could have been really, really good. But then the movie, again, wasn't such a good movie, and that sort of spoiled it for the rest of us, It sucks, because this version of Godzilla looks absolutely brilliant. Horizontal or vertical, this version of Godzilla, to me, I love the design. It's just very, very iconic. It was really, really good. But then they sort of screwed it up with the plot points. Your thoughts, Zimcast,
No,
Vic will go next. I'll end it off.
Okay. Sorry.
Actually, I agree with a lot of what you said. And I guess, like, for me, when it comes to 98, I guess it's just, like, my perspective on things and how I grew up with it. Where, like, even if what makes it Godzilla is minuscule compared to what would be other things or the Beast, what I can see in it, I can appreciate. Even if, like, I understand and agree that a lot of what made it was not the best or for the best. I will still appreciate what I can see and just what we ended up with. Um, and just overall, I think I just love talking about '98 in any sense.
Hmm. I think also like my thoughts on things have kind of remained largely the same. Like there's so much that came down to when it like comes to how 98 was handled and what could have been, what we did get, and sort of what ended up being the fallout of the certain films just not coming to pass. Um, I think it's always an interesting thought experiment to talk about these, especially because of like what we do know in this film in relation to like other films, and especially because like we did finally get a traditional Godzilla years down the line, and the kind of strengthen points for myself as well as like explain away certain myths or beliefs that were probably held at the time when it came to like whether or not Godzilla could be adapted for Hollywood. But yeah, no, that would be my thoughts. For both you gentlemen, where can we find you guys? We'll start with Vic and then down to
Okay, cool.
GP.
You can find me on Twitter as G98 Appreciator or Jakursky Vic. I'm currently opening commissions for kaiju illustrations, so if you want to check that out, if you like my work, some of it was featured here with the chart and my profile pic.
Yeah, that looks very nice, man.
Mm.
Thank you.
Yeah, and again, I'm Generation Productions. You can find me on YouTube here under Generation Productions, Generation Productions 2, as well as also you can also find me on Facebook as well. And I've even got a Facebook group as well, Generation Productions Facebook group as well. So you're all welcome to come over and hang out.
And of course, you can find me as Zimcast99 almost anywhere on the internet. And I hope you all had a wonderful night. I know it's raining outside for me, and apparently there's blizzards warning for other people across the country. So you all stay safe.
Yep.
And I may do some more streams later not later tonight, but later down the week. And if I do not, I will say this now: Merry Christmas to you all. And if I can, I might do a New Year stream. Um, but yeah, you all have a great rest of your nights. Enjoy.
Have a good one,
Mhm.
guys. Bye.